Hello, everyone. Welcome to our circle and Salve Women. For today, we're going to talk about when you just have to do you. And so I get to humble myself as I try to do every time with the, first of all, ROTFLOL. And that was, I learned that many times, many years ago with my older children when they started texting and it was all in abbreviations and it's rolling on the floor, laughing out loud, or sometimes they would just say rolling on the floor. And of course, my students taught me that. And it's funny because you can relate it to your life. And so I remember this story. One of my fascinating students who became really very good in math competitions and so forth, but had shared with me a story about two countries. I'm not going to say which ones because I'm sure those of you who follow that remember, but there are two countries, and one was working very hard on a pen that would then defy gravity, and so that they could write in space with a pen, and yet another country was like, let's just continue to use a pencil. And that's my kind of sense of humor, because when my student told me that, I just thought that was hilarious. Because for those of us who like to tinker, who like to make things, who like to always think you could do things better, we've all run into those moments where we do something, and like my husband, I would always go to just consignment shops or thrift stores or so, and I would find something that doesn't work, and then I would tell my husband, I can fix that, I can make something. And it got to a point where I ran out of time. Like, there's just things where I go, I'm not going to do that, or I just resew something, just it would be fun and it wouldn't cost me much. And so he knew that was just the type of things I like to do, and I felt like I've always been that way. But I'm not a hoarder at all by any means either. So, when I would do that, then I'd get rid of it. And I felt like sometimes you're returning something that's worse than what it was. Or when I say returning, donating something worse than it was. So I always try to make it better, even if I wasn't going to use it anymore. And so what's interesting is, we do these things and we don't really think about judgment, right? Because, you're in your own home and you're doing things for yourself and you're experimenting. But why is it when it seems like we're in the public eye that we hesitate to do things that you may think, oh, this could be embarrassing if this doesn't work? And so I bring to you the story in this article about a time when I went to a meeting with my principal and my vice principal. We were visiting these schools that were a little bit more advanced in their development and their academia. And so it was really great. I was excited. It was one school after another, and I remember being very having arrived early, and we were sitting in a room, and I see the Keurig, and I was like, oh my goodness, I've never used a Keurig before. And that was like the sign of the time, the zeitgeist, and so I said to myself, I'm going to James Bond this thing, because I'm sitting there and people commingle, but I didn't really have much to say, and I don't like to fake a moment. I try not to. And so I decided to just, excuse myself. I don't even know if I did say excuse me, but just stood up and went straight to the Keurig, and I was like, totally gonna figure this one out. So I put a pot in, I chose which one I wanted, and I'm standing there, and here come a lady that comes in, and everyone's like proceeding to go sit down, and here I am still standing because my my coffee wasn't made. And so she had asked me, what seems to be the matter. I'm like, oh, I'm waiting for it to brew, but it hasn't been brewing yet. And she closes the lid, and pops it closed, and then all of a sudden pushes the button, and then it started brewing. And I was like, oh my goodness, thank you so much, And what she didn't realize is my very first time. And yeah, so, perhaps in other people's minds, like, when people don't try to give you that look or that eye contact, they're probably thinking, oh my goodness, she just got corrected. I'm one of those that unless you meant to hurt me, unless you really meant to just like put me in my place, probably even meant then, it's like if I learned something, if I just got something like from a 0 to a 10 in my mind, I just won, and so in my thought I was like, oh my goodness, I know how to use Keurig now. So there I am, going to my seat, and then I'm setting my coffee down happily, and I'm settling myself in, and all of a sudden everyone's seated, and then the principal, who happened to be the person helping me, and at that time I hadn't known, but doesn't matter, right? I mean, all leaders are leaders, and thankfully that showed a very good leader on her part. And so as she sat down, everyone's taking out their laptops. Here I am, just drinking my cup of coffee, and I was very thankful in my head to go, I know how to use a Keurig now. And that was my moment of time of just, you could call it being humbled, but honestly, I was in the moment of, I just learned to do something. And, that's when you have to turn a moment around and think, what did you gain from it though? And so, it's amazing because I honestly feel that because I've come from humble moments in my life. I mean, again, I didn't mention this in this article, but I remember going to middle school with the sole of my shoes slipping open, and people would, before they could, or maybe if they did, they were like, your shoes, like the soles are flapping. I was like, I saw that shoes that talked. I think I mentioned that in my my introduction on my page. And so you learn to laugh at yourself because there are just moments where you're beyond control and you have to go, but I'm victorious out of this. I'm not going to be sitting here being a victim. I'm not going to sit here and cry about it. I'm not going to sit here and feel sorry for myself, because what does that do? Why is it that I feel sometimes people have to share all their moments of hardship and all their moments of defeat, when you really should be looking at it in a victorious moment and saying to yourself, when I do win, when I do become victorious, when I do get over this hurdle, that's when people will hear about it or see it. And that is what you want people to see, because real drama, at least I really think, to strengthen your mind, you don't want anyone to know when you're weak. You don't want anyone to know when you are suffering. You want people to see the part in you that can then strengthen them, that can then help them to be bigger and better and smarter, stronger. And so for me, that was it. Like with the Keurig, here's everyone taking out their laptops, and in the back of my head, I was like, I just learned to use a Keurig. So grown children are afraid to try, and perhaps there have been moments where I say, maybe not now, because you learn to just get wiser at picking the right time to do things. But there are just times where you can't help it, and you just say to yourself, it's time to James Bond this thing. And no one got hurt, no cars were blown up, and no feelings were hurt, and all was well. And I mentioned in my article, perhaps if M was there, probably would have looked at me with so much scorn, and I would have just been like calm and collect and thinking, all is well, So from Einstein to Socrates, we have the tendency to think that perhaps they just had their moments of perfection. And those are the things that we take note of, that they were amazing, and they were bold, or that they were highly intellectual, and all these things that we speak of today that perhaps to them may have taken quite some time until they had that eureka moment where they said, it finally worked. And so I think to myself, why is it that we're so quick to then push at people, and like look at someone when they're failing and think they're never going to succeed, but yet when they do, we have some people then all of a sudden show up and act like they were there the whole time, that they believe, or that they were the ones who pushed, that they were the ones who showed them how to get there to the next level. And I think to myself, very few were there the entire time. Like I was so grateful for my principal, my vice principal at that time, saying nothing, just totally like being that team victory of not even saying anything to me, just letting me be me. When you're around people like that to me is professionalism in the heart, the mind, the body, and spirit, because they get it, that like, okay, so she just did something that she obviously didn't know, and she was corrected, but she doesn't seem to be bothered, and we're not going to be bothered with her. I mean, that's amazing stuff. And I'm grateful for that type of strength and that type of understanding with people, because, it could have easily been something that I could have been corrected by. Not that it would have changed me, but at the same time, you realize and are grateful for people for how good they are as a person who are working with you. So, I think that all the time. And so we're always quick to laugh at people and think to ourselves, oh my goodness, that sounds so silly, right? I mean, I think like the Wrights brothers, right? How many times they were on that hill, probably going, with their wings and going down and testing out their aeroplane. And then all of a sudden now we look back and go, who created airplanes? Who are the ones who really were the forefathers of thinking this through? I mean, so many things. So when you think about the things that people laugh at, you really have to say to yourself, like, you know what, it's okay. I mean, you're going to have to accept the fact that not everybody's going to see what you're thinking, and not everybody is going to know exactly what's going on in your head. But when you are driven to understand what it is that you're seeking to understand, then that's on you. And so, by the way, the zero gravity pen does exist. And so even when I laughed, do know that there was someone out there who persevered, and so good for you. And in the words of my mother, God bless us all. Thank you so much again for listening, and we will see you next time. Keep doing you, keep loving you, just keep doing whatever it is that you pursue to do. And so what if other people laugh? At the end of it, you know what? It is your joy, it is your happiness, and see you at the penthouse, right? And it doesn't matter what level you arrive at, as long as you are higher than off the couch. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next time.